Welcome to ANEC Sports' coverage of the Indiana High School Boys Basketball Sectional Tournament. My name is Sam Frick. I'm the founder and editor at Around the Northeast Corner, covering 30 schools across Northeast Indiana and parts of Elkhart County. And so, just a couple of days after Norwell hoisted a girls basketball state championship, we now shift over to the boys' side as their tournament gets underway on Tuesday for most schools. Some will play on Wednesday, and then Friday will be semifinals with the championships being awarded on Saturday night. We kick things off with Class 1A. This is the class we have the fewest sectionals we cover at ANEC Sports. And we will begin with 1A Sectional 55. I look at this sectional on top of my head, and I think this is kind of a mediocre sectional statistically on paper. I look at all these teams in that field, and I'm saying none of these teams really stand out from the rest overall as a team. I mean, there's a couple of teams that are intriguing. I mean, on paper, when you look at John Harrell's SAGMA ratings, they do consider Southwood and Northfield to be favorites in that sectional. You look at Southwood, they're a team led by Bryce Wilcox, who's averaging 19.5 points per game on a 45% shooting, 8.1 rebounds per game is the junior forward. Bryce Wilcox of the Southwood Knights represent the TRC. They also have Emery Liddick, a junior small forward, averaging 10 points per game, and then Mads Marshall is averaging 8.5 points per game. So when you look at the Southwood team, you got three players that can knock down some shots, but Wilcox is essentially going to be the player that really gets all the attention in that sectional. This is a team that shoots 39% from the floor, 28% from three, 65% from the foul line, so they're not particularly consistent at shooting the basketball. 24.8 rebounds per game, so this is a team that should be able to cause some havoc inside. 11.5 assists, 9.3 steals per game, 2.3 blocks. It's a pretty decent defensive team. They do commit about 14 turnovers per game, so that's something to keep an eye on in this sectional. But of all the teams in that sectional, they are a team that is undefeated against their sectional, even against their rivals in Northfield. That will be their opponent on Tuesday night. They defeated Northfield back on February 21st, 55-41. Southwood 11-11 on the season. They've been 500 most of the year, 49.9 points per game, 56.5 points against. But again, they've been able to take care of business for the most part against the teams that they should be able to beat. Northfield, they started the season 7-4. They have lost 9 of their last 11. So they come into this sectional at 9-13 overall. Again, kind of like with Southwood, their numbers are relatively similar, 47 points per game. They're giving up 51 points. So again, a little more of a defense-first team than they are scoring the basketball. They are led by Carter Rogers, their combo guard senior, averaging 12.1 points per game. They do have a freshman center by the name of Cody Holmes, shooting 52% from the floor, 7.2 points per game, and 7.1 rebounds. Jaden Bear is a senior guard, averaging 3.9 assists per game. But again, with Northfield, they're pretty much a hot and cold offensive team. They're really going to have to play good defense to win this sectional championship, which Northfield, I don't remember for sure when the last time they won their sectional. That was in 2013. Southwood's had a couple of nice streams of success, including a trip to the state finals just a couple years ago. So Southwood does have going for them on paper. But I will say this, Northfield is averaging 26.8 rebounds per game. This is a team that should be able to compete in the glass against the Southwood Knights. It's just going to boil down to whether or not they can stop Bryce Wilcox down low and take care of the basketball. Those are going to be very important things. It could be one of those gritty, tough matchups to begin that sectional tournament. And because these two teams do play each other right off the bat, this is going to make this sectional very intriguing because John Harrell thinks this is probably the best matchup on paper. When you look at the rest of this bracket, I think Cowan they're playing North Miami on the second half of that Tuesday night doubleheader. Cowan's 7-14 on the season. Again, Cowan located in Muncie, Indiana. They have played better basketball as of late. They have won all their 7 games in the month of February. Actually, take that back. They won 6 of their 7 in the month of February. But they were winless to start the season. I believe they were 0-11 to start the season. They have won 7 of their last 10 games, which means Cowan is a team that could sneak up on North Miami in the first round. This is a North Miami team that is averaging 55 points per game, only giving up 55.5. And this Cowan team obviously can score a little bit as well. Cowan shooting about 32% from 3, 69% from the free throw line, I believe. They're also shooting 40% on the season are the Cowan Blackhawks, and they're led by Brody Clifford, their sophomore guard, at 12.3 points per game. They got a solid forward by the name of Gentry Groves at 6.3 rebounds per game. I don't know anything about North Miami this year. They don't really post stats at all this season, so your guess is as good as mine on how well North Miami pans out. I'm going to say North Miami has the edge on paper, but Cowan is playing better basketball as of late. They could be a team that could sneak up in that opening game against North Miami. You look at the bottom half of the bracket, Daleville against Tri-Central. These two teams met earlier in the season back on January the 4th, where Tri-Central defeated Daleville in overtime 55-53. Now, Tri-Central got off to a very good start. They started the season, let's see here, they're 9-13, so they started the season, 6-3 to begin the season. Unfortunately for them, they have lost 10 of their last 13 games, although they did beat North Miami during this losing streak of sorts. So Tri-Central could be a team that could be intriguing in this sectional, although I think Daleville at 6-15, I think their numbers are very deceiving. You know, this is a team that averages 56 points per game, and I think on any given night, this team could play well enough in a sectional game that they could be able to win a round, maybe even 2 rounds, and even there's a possibility they even win the sectional. And I think it all bodes down to what happens with Hunter Suchina. Hunter Suchina, yep, we'll just go ahead and call him that. He's averaging 18.8 points per game, is the senior combo guard, shooting 40% from the floor. And he is going to be a guy that's really going to be a key player to watch for Daleville, as well as Josh Wilson, their senior power forward. Noah Colvin, their senior combo guard, at 5.3 assists per game, 2.8 steals per game for those 3 names, as I mentioned earlier. So I think if there's a team that could potentially make a run in this sectional, Daleville could be an intriguing team to keep an eye on here. I will say of all the games in this sectional bracket, at least for the opening round, I feel very confident saying Westdale should beat Southern Wells on Wednesday night at 7:30 p.m. That's the second of a Wednesday doubleheader. Westdale comes in 9-12 in the season. They're averaging 55.7. They're giving up 56.8. They just played Southern Wells back on the 25th, which would be nearly a week ago, and they beat them 65-34. Southern Wells just 1-20 on the season, one of the worst seasons in program history for the Southern Wells Raiders. They were winless for most of the year, really up until February 22nd, where they defeated the Hamilton Marines 49-33 at Hamilton. But please keep in mind that this is Hamilton, so that doesn't really scream anything to write home about for Southern Wells. Now, I mean, CJ Reber's having a nice senior year for the Raiders. Josh Albach is a decent player when he's healthy, although he hasn't been able to play all of his games this year because of an injury. Trying to think here, Landon Johnson, their sophomore guard, a pretty decent start to the year, still averaging 10 points per game. But I think other than that, I think Southern Wells is it's a rebuilding team. It's not a good basketball team. And I think Doug Smith knew right away this was going to be a long first year for the Raiders. Very unlikely to see Southern Wells make it past the first round. So I fully expect the Westdale Warriors to make a run in this sectional. And a lot of the reasons why Westdale could be a team to watch in this sectional is they got a superstar offensive juggernaut by the name of Josiah Love. Josiah Love is a senior guard for this Westdale team, averaging 23.6 points per game, shooting 50% from the floor, 1.6 steals per game, shooting 72% from the free throw line, 50% from the floor, 45% from 3. Holy cow, this kid can flat out shoot the basketball. 43% from 3 in his career. He's going to approach 1,300 points in his career when it's all said and done. Just a fantastic basketball player for the Westdale Warriors. So Southern Wells is going to have their hands full on Wednesday night. And I honestly could see Westdale make it to the championship game on Saturday because you've got a player of this caliber in Josiah Love. They also got another nice player in Julian Carpenter who maybe somewhat gets overlooked because of the hype with Josiah Love. 13.2 points per game, 4.7 rebounds, 2.8 assists for Julian Carpenter. So their guards at Westell are pretty darn good for a team that is, below 500, not necessarily a great basketball team. They're not necessarily a great team, but this is still a pretty good basketball team. They should be able to shoot the ball well. 43% from the floor. They are shooting 32% from three. I mean, you would have to expect that considering how much of the attention goes to Josiah Love. You have to think they're shooting the ball decently well. 62% from the foul line, however. That's one thing that could be a weak link for Westell. They are, let's see here. I want to make sure I look at this real quick for Westell. They are averaging 26 rebounds per game, so they actually do a decent job crashing glass. And they are committing 13 turnovers per game. Okay, it's whatever on that. But Westell, I think their offense is pretty intriguing. And I think just because of that, they are a team that can light up the scoreboard on any given moment. They can be a team that can make a run and win their first sectional in, I want to say it's 18 years now for Westell. Now, they did lose some games against their sectional opponents like Cowan. They lost them by 8 points back on February 1st. Now, keep in mind, Cowan has been playing really good basketball in the last month, so that makes a lot of sense why they struggled with Cowan. Cowan's playing much better ball as of late. They obviously played Southern Wells. They took care of business with them. They played Daleville. They beat them by 11 points. Again, we could see a rematch in the sectional semifinals between these two teams. It could be an exciting matchup if these two were to meet. But beyond that, there's a lot of unknown with the sectional. I don't know how they would match up with Southwood or Northfield, who are battle-tested teams and teams that have experience of success in the state tournament, especially for Southwood, who made it to the state finals just a couple years ago. So for me, if I'm going to do predictions right now, I like Southwood by a hair or two against Northfield. Probably a 2-possession game. I don't think it'll be quite as lopsided as it was the first time around. I'll take Southwood in that matchup. I'll give Cowan the edge over North Miami. I think just the fact Cowan's playing really good basketball right now is one of the things that really catches my eye. So I'll take Cowan over North Miami in an upset. I'll take Daleville over Tri-Central. And then give me Westell in a landslide over Southern Wells. In the semifinals, Southwood against Cowan. Could be an intriguing matchup. I like Southwood against Cowan. And give me Westell and Josiah Love over Daleville. So the championship game would feature Southwood, Westell, based on my predictions. I will still take Southwood. But again, the Josiah Love effect could be the difference in the sectional. And if Josiah Love has a monster tournament, Westell wins the sectional. But I'm going to take Southwood in this one. Take a look at Sectional 52. This is hosted by Fremont at the Cage in Fremont, Indiana, up in Steuben County. So Tuesday night will feature 2 games. 6 o'clock will feature Fremont and Bethany Christian. These two actually just met, I believe, last Friday. Actually, that was their last game of the regular season. Bethany took care of business 40-35 at the Meadowlands. I believe Aiden Falcon had 16 points for the Bethany Christian Bruins. Now, these two are going to meet again on Tuesday, this time at Fremont. And I will tell you from my history of knowing Fremont, they are a much tougher team at home than they are on the road historically because it is the Cage. It's one of the more unique atmospheres in Northeast Indiana. And Bethany historically has struggled with Fremont in the past because of that. The only thing with Fremont this year, they are 3-19. This is far from a great year for Fremont. Not a great year for the Fremont Eagles whatsoever. But I will also say it's a younger team. They, for the first time, I think their depth is really starting to take its toll for Fremont. Injuries have become an issue for Fremont. Consistency has been an issue for this team. But when Colton Guthrie and Caden Huffnig are healthy and playing good basketball, those are 2 very solid guards for the Fremont Eagles. They're probably their 2 best athletes on this team. Ethan Grimm has shown some moments of having a great performance here and there. But beyond those 3, they are a very young basketball team. And that's part of the reason why I think Fremont is going to have a hard time winning the sectional is because they really struggle to find a experienced, cohesive group to build around those 3 players. And that might be the reason why Fremont might not even win the first game, just because of that. Now, because they're Fremont, they have a chance. They've also played a lot of close games in a pretty tough schedule for Fremont. So they're not a pushover by any means. And they've been close. They just haven't been able to put it together for 4 quarters. Now, with Bethany Christian, we know with the Bruins over the years, they have been a competitive team under Dan Mast. Bethany Christian 10-13. As you know, the Bruins have a lot of those really good athletes from the soccer team, such as Jacoby Reinhardt, Sawyer Beachy, Zane Parson, right? Those are really good Bethany soccer players on this team. I mentioned Aiden Falcon had a decent performance against Fremont, scoring 16 points. That's their senior power forward. This is a team that rebounds the ball pretty darn well, and that's one of the things Fremont struggles with this year, is being able to rebound the basketball. Bethany, 22.6 rebounds per game. It's a pretty solid number for a 1A school in Bethany Christian. I mentioned Sawyer Beachy. I mentioned Jacoby Reinhardt, Zane Parson, Aiden Falcon, and also Trey Caffey is another one that's had some strong spurts for the Bruins this season. I still would take Bethany Christian just because they're more of an older team. They're a little more athletic, especially inside, while the Bruins have struggled to put it together for 4 quarters, not always being consistent. The Bruins have a pretty solid basketball team, and they should be able to at least play for a chance to play for a championship on Friday, in which they would play Lakewood Park, who comes at 5-16. Lakewood Park, kind of like Fremont to some extent. They are a pretty young team, I think. Maybe slightly more experienced than Fremont, but I mean, they're not that much older if they are at all. Avery McFarland is going to be the name that really stands out for Lakewood Park. He's averaging over 22 points per game. He really is their go-to player. If Avery McFarland has a strong game, Lakewood Park will be in every game in the sectional because he's just that good of a basketball player. Actually, he's at 18 points per game. So his number has dropped a little bit in the last month of the season, but still, he's a kid that can get you 30 points in a big game. Davey Freitas is a solid guard for Lakewood Park. And then McFarland's also averaging 11.7 rebounds per game. So he's averaging a double-double per game. He's obviously their go-to player inside. They feed the ball to him a lot. Andrew Nitzlin, 31% from 3. He's a guy that can get you some baskets from the perimeter. But Lakewood Park does struggle with some scoring depth. Davey Freitas is probably their one other serious threat offensively for Lakewood Park. Again, not a great offensive team. They're a team that doesn't shoot the ball particularly well. But because of the presence of Avery McFarland, they're a team that should be able to compete inside, especially in a sectional that I would honestly say is very wide open this year. I don't find any of these teams to be particularly better than everyone else, although some might say Canterbury would be the favorites. But keep in mind, Canterbury did lose to Fremont 62-60, so it's not something to take for granted, so to speak. So I would say the top half of that bracket, I'm good. I'll to be quite honest with you, I'm probably going to take Bethany. But I'm not saying this with 100% confidence because keep in mind that they only beat Fremont by 5 points, and they are a team that can easily win this game and even win both games. So it's not something to overlook here if you're Bethany. And then they also only beat Lakewood Park by 4 points just a couple weeks prior, 49-45 at Lakewood Park. So again, kind of a toss-up in the top half of the bracket. I'm leaning towards Bethany in that section of the bracket. Bottom half of the bracket, Lakeland Christian in Hamilton. Neil Franz is the new head boys basketball coach at Lakeland Christian. Fremont fans are very much familiar with Neil Franz because he's one of the winningest coaches in the history of Fremont basketball, particularly on the girls' side. A lot of good years for Neil Franz, especially during the years when Shea Roanhouse Thomas was on that girls' basketball team about 10 years ago. So Neil is very much a Fremont fan favorite, so to speak. And Lakeland Christian, kind of like with Callan, Lakeland Christian got off to a very slow start. They lost, 10 of their first 11 games. They were 1-10 going into January 18th. But since then, Lakeland Christian has been scorching hot. They have won 9 of their last 12 games. Now, they are going into the tournament on a 3-game skid. But keep in mind, when you look at the schedule for Lakeland Christian, they beat Hamilton by 14 points back on December 7th. They are conference rivals in the Hoosier Plains. They should take care of business against the Hamilton Marines, who are just 1-19 on the season. They also played Bethany back on December 21st. They lost by 21 points to Bethany. Could be a closer game the second time around because they are conference rivals, so they know each other quite a bit, are the Bethany and Lakeland Christian. They beat Southern Wells by 1971-52 back on the first. They beat Lakewood Park by 20, 53-33 back on the sixth. And then just last week, they played Canterbury on the 25th. They only lost to the Cavaliers by 4 points, 64-60. Now, Canterbury is definitely not the same team as they were last year when they won a state championship. They lost a lot from that team. So, by Canterbury standards, it is a rebuilding season for the Canterbury Cavaliers. So, it does open the door a little bit for a Lakeland Christian or Bethany Christian to take home the sectional championship. Keep in mind, there is no Elkhart Christian in this sectional, which, Elkhart Christian is not the same team as they were last year either, but it does mean this sectional is very much wide open. But I think for LCA to be successful, it's going to hinge on the success of Micah Martin, who's averaging 18.7 points per game. They also have another solid player in Josiah Rice, who's averaging 15.3 points per game. So they have two really good players that are capable of making baskets for the Cougars of Lakeland Christian. Unfortunately, I don't have anything else for LCA other than scoring, so I don't know exactly how they fare in other aspects of the game, but I would say, considering the history of Neil Franz's teams, they're going to be pretty physical teams. They're going to be quick teams. They're going to be pretty athletic teams. So I think LCA is going to have a little bit more finesse than I think we tend to think with Lakeland Christian Academy. And keep in mind, with the Cougars of Lakeland Christian, they've had a recent history of some pretty decent players coming through that school, and especially at a rate where they can score, 50, 60 points a game. Just a couple of years ago, Lakeland Christian won 19 games just 2 years ago. So they are very capable of making a run in this sectional because it's a very wide open sectional, and they have a couple of very proven players to make a run here. They should be able to beat Hamilton on Tuesday, which would set up a matchup with the Canterbury Cavaliers on Friday in the second half of that doubleheader. Canterbury 8-14 in the season. They are struggling, as I mentioned. This is the down season for the Cavaliers after a great season last year, winning a state championship in Class 1A. But they're still a decent team, like 8-14, 46.5 points per game, given a 58. They play a very difficult schedule, as you would expect for Canterbury. They beat Central Noble, who, let's be honest, Central Noble's looked a lot better since that opening game on November 27th. They played Columbia City, who just won the Northeast State. They lost to Columbia City by 16. They played Belmont. Not a great 3A team this year, but still better than most 1A teams. They beat Belmont by 7. They only lost to Adams Central by 3 points, 44-41. They played Blackhawk Christian, which Blackhawk is a monster in 3A this year. They played Manchester, a really good 2A team. Only lost to Squires by 13, which the Squires had Gavin Bennon. They played Leo, a pretty solid Leo team that's had their ups and downs. Only lost to Leo by 8 points. Played Bishop Lures, got crushed by Bishop Lures. Bishop Lures is very good. They play Lakewood Park on the 17th of January. They beat them by 3 points. But again, the Avery McFarland effect probably played a factor in some of Canterbury's struggles with Lakewood Park. They also played Northup on the 28th. They beat Hamilton by 18. Played Wayne, played Heritage. They beat Fremont by 5 points. I said they lost to Fremont. I take that back. They beat Fremont, but only by 5 points. They only lost to Prairie Heights by 3. Decent Prairie Heights team. Lost to Lewis Cass by 2. Played New Haven. They beat Lakeland Christian and just recently played Huntington North, who has Ethan Zahn. They only lost them by 24 points, considering how dangerous Huntington North is. So Canterbury is very battle-tested. Derek Adams is a very good basketball coach. And so Canterbury will be favored. Not by a huge margin this time around, but they will be favored. Reed Hayes is going to be the name to watch for Canterbury. 13.5 points per game, 56% from the floor, 6.6 rebounds per game, 1.1 blocks. So the combo forward is a big part of Canterbury's success this season. They also got Iran Padamalingham. Sorry if I butchered his name there. 2.7 assists per game. And then you got Alden Greider, 2.6 steals per game, 60% foul shooter. Ben Harden, freshman guard, shooting 31% from 3. Canterbury is a pretty balanced team, and that's the one thing they have over everybody else is Canterbury is a pretty balanced team. Maybe not Maybe not to the level of last season, but Canterbury typically plays a pretty deep bench. And so the Cavaliers are going to have bodies to work with. They have some pretty decent athletes, although it is a far cry from last season. The one thing that does concern me for Canterbury is they are only shooting 21% from three, which for boys basketball, it is abysmal. Shooting 21% from three is bad. But let's also be very clear that Canterbury did lose a lot of good players from last season's team. So that is to be expected. If Canterbury is going to be successful this season, they're going to have to be able to score inside. They're going to have to be able to rebound the basketball. And more importantly, they're going to have to play some pretty good defense because of those things I just mentioned earlier. The Lakeland Christian team could be a team to watch out for. Is the fact they're probably the hottest team in that sectional. Neil Franz has a history of success in the playoffs. LCA has two really good basketball players on that team. So if there's going to be an upset in this sectional, I could see Lakeland Christian in the bottom half of the bracket. I could see Fremont in the top half of the bracket. I mean, Fremont only lost to Canterbury by 5 points, and Fremont has two really solid players in Guthrie and Huffnagel, and Grimm can make some baskets as well. But I think at the end of the day, I still like Canterbury in a close game, which sets up Bethany and Canterbury for a sectional championship, which for Canterbury, they did not play Bethany in the regular season, interestingly enough. So it could be intriguing to see how Canterbury matches up with the soccer kids of Bethany. Ironically, Canterbury does have a really good history of soccer as well, so it would make this kind of an intriguing matchup just from that standpoint alone. I will still take the Cavaliers, but I don't think it's going to be a blowout this time around. They're going to, again, Canterbury's going to have to play well if they want to have a chance to win the sectional, but give me the Cavaliers in a close one. Real quick, let's take a look at Sectional 51, hosted by North Judson, which is in the Central Time Zone. I don't particularly like this sectional this year, per se. I mean, South Central Union Mills is an intriguing team. Trinity Greenlawn, 14-8 on the season. 37 points per game on defense. So Trinity Greenlawn's defense is going to be intriguing to see how well they match up here. The only problem is the Titans of Trinity Greenlawn do not score well, only 43.5 points per game. They lost to Triton by 17 points in the regular season. And Triton is the heavy favorite in this sectional. 19-4 in the season, averaging 51.7 points per game, giving up only 34 points per game under the legendary head coach, Jason Groves of the Triton Trojans, who has been the coach at Triton for 20 years now. So this is a program with a lot of history of established, consistent success at Triton in Bourbon, Indiana. And just based on that alone, just how consistent they are, they're a well-rounded basketball team. They're a team that's going to primarily be able to rebound and defend well. One of the best defenses in the state of Indiana. And so from that standpoint forward, Triton should be able to win this sectional. I like their chances over Oregon Davis. ECA could be an intriguing team for Triton in the semifinal matchup. They did play Triton back on the 30th, and they actually did beat Triton 32-28. So, I mean, Elkhart Christian does have the history of success from last year going for them. Remember, last season they went all the way to semi-state, lost to Canterbury in overtime in the semi-state semifinals. So, ECA does have that swagger going for them. Could be a close game between Elkhart Christian and likely Triton in the second round. I'm still going to take Triton to win that matchup against ECA. And then I'm gonna go South Central Union Mills, winning their first round matchup against North Judson. I'll take Trinity Greenlawn over Argus, and I'll take the Satellites of South Central to advance to the championship game. But in the end, I am going to take the Triton Trojans to win that sectional championship. Keep in mind, as I mentioned earlier, only one loss in their sectional. That's their lone loss in 1A this season. That came against Elkhart Christian. ECA, I think, will be a team to watch as an upset pick, but I like Triton's chances.